Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another insightful session of CANTO Conversations. My name is Miguel Ignacio Estrada. I am the Chief Strategic Relations Officer at LACNIC, and I'll be your moderator. Today, we have a distinguished speaker with us, Mr. Oscar Robles, Chief Executive Officer of LACNIC. Our topic for today's discussion is IPv6 for decision makers, more connected people, smarter systems, and more secure internet. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that we'll have a Q&A session at the end of Mr. Robles' presentation. So please feel free to engage and submit your questions to the chat box throughout the session. Without further ado, let me introduce our esteemed speaker. Oscar Robles is our CEO at LACNIC, the Latin American and Caribbean Internet Addresses Registry, an international non-governmental organization established in Uruguay for the administration of Internet numbering resources. Mr. Robles has more than 20 years of professional experience building institutions related to Internet governance in Latin America and the Caribbean. Some of his primary objectives include promoting professionalization and the long-term sustainability of Internet resources. He is co-founder of the Latin American and Caribbean Association of Country Code Top-Level Domains, LACTLD. He is also co-founder of LACNIC, and from 1995 to 2015, he worked for LACNIC Mexico, the organization in charge of the Internet domain name .mx. Mr. Robles has been working on Internet governance, domain names, and IP addresses matters since 1995. He has actively participated in the creation of Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, ICANN, the organization with oversight of the global domain name system. He holds a bachelor degree in computer systems engineering and a master's degree in information technologies management from the Monterrey Institute of Technology. He has also pursued several executive education courses at the Kellogg School of Management, Stanford University, the University of Texas, Montevideo University, and Monterrey Institute of Technology. Mr. Robles, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Nacho. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks everyone for your for joining us to this workshop. I think that we're going to have a very fruitful conversation. I'm gonna talk to you about IPv6, and it could be seen as a very technological topic, but it is not. It used to be a very technological topic, probably 20 years ago, 10 years ago, but now it is a strategic decision and a strategic conversation that you have to have in your own countries. So let me share with you my slides that the ones that I will use during our conversation. Hopefully those are seen. Okay.
Yes, we can see them.
Good. Excellent. Thank you. Let me move my cameras here. Okay. So as Nacho mentioned, this conversation has three main topics that I will touch during this hour. IPv6, it is for more people, to connect more devices, but also to have a more secure and reliable and trusty network. So let me start first to talk about LACNIC. Who is LACNIC? LACNIC, together with the other 4 registries, we manage the Internet numbers. When we talk about Internet numbers, we talk about IPv4 addresses, IPv6, and ASN numbers, AES numbers, or autonomous system numbers. We have around 12,000 members, but those are our customers. When we talk about customers, that is from the biggest telecom operators in Latin America and Caribbean to the smallest internet service providers in the very deep parts of our countries. So we cover 33 territories, and we are a non-for-profit organization based in Uruguay since 2002. And this is a very important part of our history. We are non-for-profit, which means that we are not here to create business, to create businesses for our own, but to do things for the rest of the community. We don't advocate for the 12,000 associates, but we advocate for the internet principles, for the technical principles. So with that, let me start with our conversation about IPv6 and what it is. Today, all the devices, all the computers, all the telephone, the smartphones, all of them has a number which is used to connect through all these internet applications and all these services. Not only those devices use an IP address, but also many sensors used today with the Internet of Things, with the Industry 4.0. All those things, all those sensors are more common to require an Internet protocol number. That's the reason we have not enough numbers with IPv4, and that's why we need IPv6. Today, in Latin America, in the region, we have around 650 people in the region, but only 400 of them are connected. But this is the problem. In LACNIC, we have only 190 million IPv4 addresses. So we have not enough numbers to connect the 600 million people in our region. So that's the first reason to deploy IPv6. If we want to connect all the population, if we want to connect all the Latin American people, we have to think in IPv6 every time we think in access and internet deployment in our region. If those new projects, if those new operators have not considered IPv6, then those projects are bound to be dead before they start, because they have to think in IPv6 in order to connect the rest of the population. That's the main reason. But then if we have not enough numbers to connect the population, then we have not enough numbers to connect all the devices and all the sensors that we believe we need to connect with the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things will require many more numbers than the current need of IPv6 or IPv4 for the devices, for the current devices. The current devices are big devices, are computers, smartphones, as I mentioned, mainframes, big computers, cars. But with the Internet of Things, many sensors in the fields, many sensors in the cities, with the traffic controllers, will require an IPv6 address. All these solutions related to smart cities, related to smart homes, related to Industry 4.0 will require massive amount of IP addresses, and there's only one protocol that will provide the sufficient number of IP numbers, which is the IPv6. That's the second reason. If we want to connect all the devices, if we want to have the full promise of Internet of Things, then we have to have IPv6. But there is another reason. The reason to have a secure internet. Today, if there is a crime on the internet and there is a need to pursue the responsibles, the people that committed that crime or that threat on the internet, it's very difficult if there is only IPv4, because IPv4 today, it is shared among many different users, and with all the transactions they do in a specific time slot, it is impossible to identify the single person that committed that crime. So there is no judge, there is no law enforcement officer that will consider the hundreds or thousands of possible responsibles of that transaction and will try to interrogate. It is not possible to do that. So IPv6 allows this level of traceability of transactions. So an operator may map every IP address to a single subscriber or to a single action. If the authorities want the operator to recover that ability, the traceability of transactions, then IPv6 is the only way to recover that, that possibility. So in summary, if we want to connect all the people, if we want to connect all the devices with the Internet of Things, and we want a more secure internet, we have to think in IPv6 strategically. The thing is that this is not known by many people, and it requires many organizations involved in this deployment. Let me go through those specific challenges. So the question, are we ready to deploy IPv6? Well, it depends which part of the region are we talking about, because when we talk about averages, it is always a matter of focusing. If we are focusing on Brazil, if we're focusing on Uruguay or Mexico, then they are ready. But if we try to focus on more specific countries, then we will see that there is a stronger need to have this conversation seriously in order to help this effective deployment. A few years ago, almost 10 years ago, we conducted this study together with CAF in order to understand why IPv6 was so slow in our region. And the main conclusion is that it doesn't make business sense for many of the commercial operators, many ISPs and many telecom operators, because they had a wrong expectation. They had the expectation that introducing IPv6 will reduce the costs, or the deployment cost will generate more new customers. But that is not true. That is not the expectation about IPv6. As I mentioned, there's no technological reason, no specific commercial reason for IPv6 against IPv4. The reality is that IPv4 cost, all the costs, I will mention a few of them, are higher than just deploying IPv6. But this is a very complex equation for many of the IT areas in the telecom operators. And sometimes the CTOs, the telecom guys, the engineers don't talk with the financial in the same terms. And it has been very difficult for the businesses to actually understand what they are losing and what they need to understand to actually deploy IPv6 effectively in their networks. So if we look the regions and see how many of the internet service providers, ISPs, telecom operators, and other businesses, how many of them have already allocated IPv6, then we are the champions of that allocation. In Latin America, 97% of the members, of the customers of IPv4, they already have 97% of them, they already have IPv6. In other regions, it is different. In North America, only half of them have IPv6. In Europe, 71%. In Asia Pacific, almost 70%. And in Africa, almost half of them has enough IPv6. So in our region, there is no excuse not to deploy IPv6. They already have IPv6. We won't have more money if they deploy IPv6. We already allocate the enough space they need if they want to develop IPv6. Then the question is why they don't deploy IPv6 if they already have it? Why they don't deploy it? Well, I already explained it. The financial areas don't have this conversation about all the costs involved to maintain IPv4 infrastructure, acquisition costs, secondary markets, the risk associated with IPv4. They don't talk about that, and that's one of the main causes of this late deployment in our region. Let's see how are specific countries and territories in the region regarding the IPv6 deployment. I am listing this here, all the countries, not only those related to the LACNIC coverage area, but all the Caribbean, in order for you to see where are you compared with other countries. As you can see, there is only a few countries with a development superior of 20%, and only 2 countries with an IPv6 deployment greater than 50%. Only Dominica and Puerto Rico are above 50%. Then you can see 4 countries with 20% or more. Those are Anguilla, Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname, and Guyana. We had the chance to visit Suriname and Guyana a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, and have these conversations with the operators to try to convince them that they have to look in a more systemic way this investment in IPv6, because this is a long-term sustainability decision. This is not a technical decision. This is not a geek thing. This is a strategic decision to sustain their business in the longer term. In Guyana, they have this explosion of its economy with these oil fields. So they require a lot of new services, and apparently they are deploying in a sustained way the IPv6 together with Suriname and Trinidad and Tobago. But then you will see a lot of countries lacking this effective deployment. And I'm afraid that many of those countries will face this situation for many years. So that's why we want to have this conversation. That's why we are having this conversation, because if we see here big countries, those big countries, I think that will come up with some solution at the end of the day. But many of you will have many different challenges that will prevent the IPv6 deployment in the future if you don't start now. That's why we want to have these conversations with you. So what can you do in order to foster the IPv6 deployment? I think that there is no single actor in our countries that need to do one specific thing, and that will change IPv6 numbers just as a magic decision. You need to engage different groups, different stakeholders. Whether you are a government, or you are an operator, or an ISP, or you are part of the academia, or you are an end user, you have to have all of these groups involved in these conversations. because that's the only way that you will have a steady deployment. That's how we have seen it in other countries. We have seen that in Argentina when they created this coalition in 2016 until 2020. They had this huge increase of IPv6 deployment. Then it did stale because they dismantled this coalition. But that is something that we are considering for other countries as a best practice, and I will mention about it in a few slides. So what's in it for governments? What's the benefit for governments doing this this process or fostering IPv6 deployment? Well, first, this is the way we consider that you can foster IPv6 deployment, not through regulation, but rather through collaboration. And this is not because we don't like regulation. This is because we have seen in other countries that regulation is not effective. Let me tell you why. Regulation is sometimes it requires a strong and compulsory deadlines for IPv6 deployment to operators. And that creates friction among government and operators. The ones receiving this regulation don't start working on those deadlines, but they start complaining and establishing excuses to forbid those deadlines. And sometimes they actually introduce some legal excuses to not be bound for those regulations. So the worst of the regulation is that you are not able to invite other parties, relevant parties, to be part of these conversations. For example, academia, for example, associations, business associations, end users, civil society. All of them would be interested in knowing how good are you deploying IPv6, or even like academia, they could be part of the solution. They could be part of those professionals that will help you to introduce this protocol, to introduce these services. You will require different professionals, a good number of professionals with enough experience in order to not only configure the equipment, the solutions, the links, but to integrate all the solutions that your government and the rest of the operators and the actors in your country would require in order to have an IPv6 deployed in an adequately way. So this is the regulation. That's why we don't like regulation in this specific topic. If you come up with a strong regulation, you have to be very careful in order to ask the right indicators of success for IPv6 deployment and try to include other relevant parties to be part of this conversation. What is it what we suggest? We suggest to have collaboration, that is voluntary commitments to deploy IPv6 by the multiple interested parties. Those voluntary commitments should be respected through all these conversations. But the main topic or the main goal of this is to sit all the parties, all the interested parties in the same table and have this conversation about how close are all of them to deploy IPv6. What are the stoppers? What is it, what they are having problem with? And that creates a different environment. That creates a sense of cooperation among the interested parties. And sometimes it creates an aspirational ideas that contagiates other parties in that table. There are no legal excuses because there are no strong compulsory deadlines. all of these will be voluntary commitments. If one company is not willing to deploy IPv6, then be it. But sooner or later, that company that has no interest in deploying IPv6 will understand that all of the local parties are actually doing their part in deploying IPv6 and will change its mind sooner or later. And the best part of these collaboration efforts is that multiple interested parties could be invited to sit at this table. The CCTLD, the Internet Society, the academia, all of those parties that are not part of the regulation ideas or regulation initiatives. So through the collaboration, it is possible to include whoever you want. That has been proved to be more effective and more inclusive in our region, and I think it could help you to do a more effective deployment in your country. As I was mentioning, there are no single activities that could make IPv6 be deployed in a magic way. At the same time, there are no single organizations that could foster the IPv6 in a magic way, but there are one stakeholder that may improve IPv6 deployment in a significant way. That is the government. The governments are the main buyer of IT solutions, of technology in their own country. Probably around 50% of the purchases of technology in their country are done by the government, either by the national government or by the local government. But if the government starts asking for all the in every IT purchase to be IPv6 compatible, for example, this row in the procurement process, then it will be enough to move the needle, to make the service providers to be aware that IPv6 is needed and that they have to have IPv6 compatible services if they want to keep attending the government procurement offers. So that's one way. And I think this is the most important one. There's another very related to that single decision by the local government. The other one is to reject imports of IPv4 only compatible IT equipment. And the reason of this is because we don't want to receive any more IT trash. We will end up having very old equipment in our countries, and that would be the same as we have been receiving for many years. So we might limit or reject the introduction of IPv4 only solutions or IT equipment just in order to not get a lot of IT trash that won't be used in the future. For two reasons. One is pollution, and the second is that the longer we wait to reject these imports, the longer it will take to change all the equipment that needs to be updated to implement IPv6. So those are the only two. Those are not the only two activities or actions that we suggest. We mentioned at least 6. Some of them are related. I already mentioned at the beginning of my presentation that requesting operators to retain the ability to map every used IP address to a single identifiable subscriber or a small group of subscribers. That is a special ability of the IPv6 protocol. And that is something that will be relevant not only for the law enforcement agencies, but for many structures of the government. Okay, so let me. I won't go through these specific slides. I mentioned already some of these. Let me jump into this. This is the same slide that I was explaining a few minutes ago, but with some of the explanation of who may be interested in these actions. These actions could be done only by the government. It could be done internally through the offices, or intended and directed to the offices. It could be done to the concessionaries, the operators, the one receiving the concessions, or it could be done nationwide. We don't like this nationwide regulation for the reasons that I already mentioned, but some of them may be relevant and could make sense to you if you do the analysis in your specific country. But as you can see below, there are many of these activities that could be of interest to specific parts of the government, either the Department of Economy, Commerce, Cybersecurity, Strategy, law enforcement agencies, government acquisitions regulator, innovation government agency. If you have equipment certification labs, for example, that could be the one area that could prevent the introduction of old equipment, this IPv4 only equipment. This could be done through these laboratories of certification. So as you can see, there are different actions that could include and be of interest of many or different departments at the government, but also nationwide. So this is important because if you think you are alone in be interested on IPv6 deployment, then you have many friends in the same government that could be willing to have this deployment effectively done in the next years. But this is only government. And as I mentioned, governments are not the only ones that could have some stake in this IPv6 deployment. We have also operators, ISPs. They are probably the most interested parties in the IPv6 deployment. Of course, they are the ones doing business. And they have to consider that IPv4 addresses in the secondary market. I want to make underline that this is in the secondary market. We don't control the secondary market. The registries, we don't control the prices on the secondary market. Our prices are below $1 here, but we cannot deny that the secondary market exists. And if they want to have the ISPs, if they want to have IPv4 addresses on the secondary market, they will have to pay these amounts in order to provide enough amount of IPv4 addresses. So this is one of the costs that they have to have in mind. Then they have to consider the equipment needed to use and to take advantage of all these IPv4 addresses. Here I will mention some of them. I won't go through all of them. But if you want us, LACNIC, to have these conversations with your ISPs, with your operators, just let us know. We will be more than willing to explain many of these costs. They have to consider all these costs in their equation. If they want to keep IPv4 forever, then they need to know this. They have to have this in mind. It is very likely that they have not considering any of these costs, and they are looking for a specific killer application in IPv6 in order to deploy IPv6. The truth is that there is no killer application in IPv6. The killer application could be enough time to survive in internet, enough addresses. That would be the killer benefit, not killer application. The killer benefit is enough addresses to maintain your subscriber base of customers for the next years. So, as I mentioned, more than willing to explain all these costs associated with maintaining IPv4. Okay. All of this is for operators, for ISPs. But also, we have information to academia. As I mentioned before, academia has been the one in charge of innovation and research and capacity building in our countries for many years. And probably they are the ones already researching about IPv6, and it is very likely that they have enough professionals in their countries to deploy IPv6. If they don't, then they have to start paying attention to their own networks, to have their own deployment, and afterwards they will be ready to start training the rest of the community to do this in a proper way. Otherwise, you will have to import talent to provide this deployment in a proper way. For the end users, of course, for the end users, there is one stake here, because many of us, we are end users as well. In our personal life, we will be very much interested to have solutions that come together with IPv6 capabilities. Some of those capabilities as end users could be surveillance. Home surveillance, for example. If we want to have our cameras and we want to have our smartphones to be connected to our cameras, there is not enough IPv4 addresses to do that connection. You will have to pay a cloud service or a third-party service in order to have that connectivity, that connection. So for end users, it will be very smooth if that solution, that service, will be working in IPv6. And the other one is, it is not written here, but it is, there is a picture here, if you can see this picture. The gaming industry. The gaming industry is the most interested area to have an IPv6 deployed properly, because one of the major costs of current IPv4, the old protocol, the old numbering system, is the latency. The latency is the delay that every transaction has to pay in order to use IPv4. Why they need to pay a delay? Because they have to go through many different equipments to make advantage of very small number of IPv4 addresses in order to support many customers, in order to support hundreds of, probably thousands of internet users with a single IP address. So in all that process, all those transactions require a cost of computation. That is a delay of 10 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds for every transaction. So the gaming industry or the gaming users are the ones paying for that lack of competitiveness, and they are not competitive in all these tournaments because of the delay introduced to these transactions in IPv4. So they are willing to pay a huge amount of money just to maintain that competitiveness. They are willing to choose the ISP that is offering IPv6 or low delay, low latency in their transactions, as long as they are able to compete in all these tournaments, on all these competitions abroad. So that creates a niche, that creates another benefit for the ISPs, but also that is an interest for the end users. So this is a summary of benefits for the different stakeholders, the ISPs, the academia, the users, the government. As I mentioned, the ISPs are probably, or the operators in any case, are the main beneficiaries of all these actions, of all this deployment, because they are the one doing business. But they are not the only ones. We have academia that could be benefited a lot for this introduction. We have the end users, and of course, governments. In summary, as I mentioned since the beginning, IPv6 has to be a multi-stakeholder accelerated process, because that would make it more effectively deployed, that would make it a faster deployment and in a steady way. IPv6 is not a technological necessity anymore, and has become a strategic issue for the development of national digital initiatives, more people, more devices, and more secure internet. Not all the recommendations that I made here are applicable to all of you. Some of you may have a different needs or specific needs that may not be addressed with these recommendations, but those could be tailored to your specific needs. We offer to our 12,000 customers the training through our platform of MOOC, massive online courses. We have trained around 50,000 professionals in IPv6 for the last 10 years. We have offered that same platform to many governments that, even if they are not members, we create these spaces isolated from the rest of our customers to train parts of the governments that are willing to understand the technical part of the IPv6. This conversation is not technical at all. This conversation is, as the title suggests, for decision makers. But we have 3 or 4 training courses specifically crafted for engineers that are the ones that will deploy IPv6. Also, we have many webinars, and we conduct a specific training in our events. Last week in Panama, we have a session with the professionals talking about the most relevant and updated challenges in IPv6 deployment. So we are more than willing to provide many of this information to you. Feel free to have a look to these useful references if you are already thinking on deploying IPv6. If you're not, we suggest you to start thinking seriously on its deployment. And if you are part of the government, if you are part of the national structure that is willing to foster all these technologies, then we suggest to have a look to this. Look for regulation, look for ways to activate your local community. If you don't have the sufficient contacts, let us know. Let Ignacio know. Let Kevo know. You already know Kevon Swift, Cesar Diaz in the region, Nacho. We can collaborate with you and provide you some of the contacts that will create this small community to start this serious conversation about IPv6 deployment. So that would be the slides that I have prepared. Nacho, I don't know if you have some questions.
Yes, I do. Thank you, for that insightful presentation. As the chat was saying, we will open the floor to questions from our audience. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to address as many as we can. First I have a request that I will be answering later. Is from Rafael Sandoval asking for the slides. I'll be sending those, Rafael. Don't worry about it. Then we have a question, and it is: how do I get IPv6 resources for my ISP?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question. How
do I get
person...
IPv6?
Okay.
How do I get IPv6 resources for my ISP?
Okay, I'm assuming this person works for an ISP. If that is the case, you should have a look on who is the registry responsible for that for the country that you are. That could be ARIN, or that could be LACNIC. In any case, there is enough IPv6 out there. In the case of LACNIC, if you are part of our region, and if you already have IPv4, then you are bound, you have the right to receive IPv6 without cost, without any additional cost. If you don't have IPv4 resources, then you could ask for IPv6, and we have plenty of IPv6. You can connect to the LACNIC website, lacnic.net, and look for the IPv6 resources, and we will guide you through that process.
Okay, another one I have is where I can get IPv6 training. I think you already addressed that. It's in our campus.
Correct.
Then I have another. It says, concerning the costing acquisition between IPv4 and IPv6, unsure of the cost between, but would a strategy be to provide larger IPv6 blocks cheaper than IPv4 blocks to provide a better incentive to adopt IPv6? I think it says, well, go ahead.
Let me try to read it because
it's in the chat.
Yep. Is the cost acquisition between IPv4? Sure. What question is that? The one from...
it was posted by CANTO. Okay. I think the question is maybe there's some misunderstanding on the availability of IPv4 because it says if somehow doing IPv6 cheaper than IPv4 would be an incentive to adopt IPv6, but since IPv4 is not available nowadays, you can only get it on the secondary market. Yeah?
Wait, let me explain this because I didn't mention during my presentation. IPv6 is huge, is immense. There is a lot of availability of IPv6. So, for example, at this time, if you ask for IPv4, there is no more IPv4 space in many regions, including LACNIC region. But the smallest block of resources that you would receive is /24, which contains 256 addresses, 256 IP addresses at this time. But the same smallest block of IPv6, you will receive a /32 in IPv6. That is a number which is huge in terms of, it's almost impossible to imagine. It's 2 elevated to 96 amount of IPv6 addresses for the same, let's say, the same level of price, the same starting entry level. Okay, so 2 elevated to 96 is, I don't know, I don't imagine that number. that contains a lot of resources to allocate to different networks for the smallest ISPs. But to be honest, it also serves to many of the medium and big ISPs, because this is a huge amount of IPv6 space. So I think it covers what is your concern. If not, please say so in the question, and I will come back as soon as possible. Nacho?
Okay, I have another one. Shouldn't another option for the government regulations be concessions on the import when importing IPv6 only devices?
Yeah, that would be great. Yes, because that's let's say not the opposite, but the counterpart of blocking IPv4 only. And blocking it always contains these consequences of rejection the regulation. But if you offer concessions for those importing IPv6 only devices or solutions, that would be great. I think that it would be a strong message in your local community. Yeah.
Okay. Another question, this is from Monique Clement, on the difference between regulation and collaboration. Can you provide use cases that adopt the collaborative approach in the region?
Yes, I mentioned that we had that in Argentina. From 2016 to 2020, only 4 years, they went from 0 to almost 16%. Today it is 20. But as I mentioned, it stalled in 2020 because they stopped these collaboration efforts for many government ideas. But it was a good message for us that collaboration was sufficient to make the relevant players to actually deploy IPv6 in a steady way. Academy, many of the universities involved, because they had this association of academic networks, not only one university, but an association of academic networks. They had the CCTLD, they had some ISPs involved, and a few operators as well. So that helped a lot to increase the deployment. And unfortunately, they stopped that collaboration 5 years ago. Hopefully that will be launched again, but we've seen that it works.
Okay. And also, are there any considerable legal consequences for not adopting the regulation approach beyond the compulsory deadlines issue?
Could you repeat that question again?
Yeah. Are there any considerable legal consequences for not adopting the regulation approach beyond the compulsory deadlines?
Yeah, the reasons to not use regulation, is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
If there's another one beyond compulsory deadlines?
Yeah, as I mentioned during my presentation, I believe that not having all the stakeholders is one of the most relevant reasons why not to pursue regulation, because you are not able to sit the academy. The academy, most of the times, is not part of the concessionaries or permissionaries, the ones that are part of the regulation. You cannot bound the academy with this regulation. You cannot sit there, the CCTLD, the domain name of the country. You cannot sit there other agencies of the government. You cannot sit there the associations of businesses or the industry of telecommunications or internet. So or smallest ISPs. In bigger countries, you have a lot of small ISPs that connect villas and small towns. Those are not bound by the regulation, and you need them. you need them at least to be listening what you, the other people are talking about IPv6 deployment.
Okay. I think Monique kind of agrees with your comments before he left another one. I am also wondering whether a collaborative approach could be adopted in the development of regulations where any other noteworthy implications may arise without regulations. So it's,
yeah,
I think you agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
Shannon, hi Shannon, a long time no see. He thanking you, an excellent presentation, and he asked if you have some insights on IPv6 only applications development that will make IPv6 adoption more needed.
Hi, Chairman. I don't have one at this time. Probably you can have a look in our website. We have an IPv6 only website where we list all the equipment that is able to function in IPv6 only mode. Because that's the current approach now. For many years, we were working on convince people to have the double stack to be fluently in IPv4 and IPv6, speaking on networking. But now the approach is let's think in IPv6 only mode because there is no enough IPv4. So we have that website. You can have a look on that. I'm afraid there is no an application that works only in IPv6 and it doesn't work in IPv4. As I mentioned before, there is no killer application. That's the holy grail that has been looking for many people trying to find it and see, look, this is what we're gonna have if we deploy IPv6 now, and you cannot have it now with IPv4. Unfortunately, all of those good things that you can do with IPv6, you can do it with IPv4. But the thing is not whether you are able to do it in both, but the cost that it takes to make it work in IPv4. And that is something that not many are putting attention to. The thing is that since we born, let's say, with IPv4 deployment and many professionals are IPv4 capable, it is easier for them to make these new applications to work in IPv4. And they are kind of afraid to start thinking in IPv6 from scratch. That is one big risk in that.
Okay, I have another one. Monique again. She says, I wanted to know what other beneficial reasons might there be to adopt a regulations approach. Oh, sorry, it moved. Despite the compulsory deadline. Again, I wanted to know what. Yes, did you hear?
Yeah, but wasn't that the same question, or I'm confusing?
No, it's another one.
Could you repeat
it? What other beneficial reasons might there be to adopt a regulations approach despite the compulsory deadline?
Beneficials to adopt regulation.
To adopt regulation.
I don't see many benefits. We have seen, I'm not going to mention countries, but we've seen some regulation efforts in the region. And most of the times it takes a lot of time to actually start providing good results. But also, if they don't pay enough attention to the indicators that they ask in the regulation, the entities that are bound by the regulation will just do just enough to comply with regulation. But that doesn't mean that they will deploy IPv6. I don't know if I'm clear with this. They could be doing just an announce that they are doing something in IPv6, and that's enough for regulatory purposes. If the regulation is not done in a proper way, But that's the problem, that if it is not done properly, then there is a risky way that the concessionaries or the operators or ISPs will try to evade their responsibility and do the minimum just to comply. And that doesn't mean they will be deploying IPv6. We have seen that at least in a couple of countries. And I think that it requires a lot of attention. That's why regulation takes a huge amount of resources to the government. And not to mention the initial part, the first 3, 4, 5 years of appellations and reclamations for that regulation.
Okay, and the final one, a reflection from Monique. She said, excellent presentation, by the way, and she also, oh, you already read it.
Yep.
Yes, understand what you are saying. They made a lot. Perfect.
Thanks, Monique.
Okay, so I think we are on time and we have no further questions. So thank you very much, Oscar. We have some announcements from CANTO. So I know after thanking Oscar.
Thank you for the invitation. Sorry for jumping. Thank you for your interest, and please reach us if you want to have a deeper conversation on this.
Thank you very much, Oscar. Crystal, the stage is yours.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am trying to put on my camera and it's telling me my camera is in use by another app. I am not too sure why. So good morning, everyone. First to begin, I love the presentation. Oscar, not too sure if I'm going to be coming through now. I love the presentation. I was very much intrigued by it. IPv version 6 is something that I heard about in a textbook, read in a textbook in school so many years ago. So now to see that it's actually here, I mean, at that time they made it sound like, you know, we don't need to worry about that. But to see that it's actually here is well, it's mind blowing. I love the fact that you all identify the key stakeholders, that it's not just the government, it's not just the ISPs, but it's the academia as well as us, the users, who will kind of drive this going forward. And I also love the fact that we all agree that regulation is not the way to do it. We've seen it, especially working in this space, working with ISPs, the government. From the time you start to develop policies and put regulations in place, you know, it's going to take years and years until things are done. So I like the way of collaboration, which I think is a softer way to get the relevant stakeholders buy-in. Yeah, so I think we all agreed it was a great presentation, and I think it's a conversation that we need to continue to have. Yeah, I think everyone agrees with that, right? I'm so sorry my camera's not coming on, but at least you guys are hearing me. So to start off with the announcements, I want to tell everyone, please mark your calendars for our upcoming annual conference and trade exhibition. It is scheduled for July 7th through 10th in 2024 at the JW Marriott Turnberry and Spa in Miami, Florida. It promises to be an eventful gathering of industry leaders, experts, innovators, the works. So if you've never been to a CANTO event before, please, this is your opportunity to join us at CANTO. We're a community and we thrive on collaboration and bringing the IT and ICT sectors together. And if you enjoyed today's CANTO conversation, there are going to be more conversations like this, more panel discussions, discussing several things relating to IT and ICT. Yeah. Secondly, I'm pleased to announce, and we're hopefully able to get the presentation up in time. I'm pleased to announce that our next CANTO Conversations webinar is scheduled for Thursday, May 28th at 10 a.m. We will be having with us Mr. Scott Argue, who is the Executive Vice President and Business Development of SaskTel International, and Peter Dang, who is the Manager of Strategic Planning from SaskTel. The topic is going to be lessons learned from a 5G transition, insights from an operator. So I am very much intrigued to hear what that is about. We know 5G. I mean, we heard about 4G. Now we're at 5G. So I think that's going to be another interesting conversation. And that is the intent of that CANTO conversation, is to provide you with the lessons learned and the perspective of an operator who is making the transition. Yeah. To conclude, once again, I want to give a special thanks to Mr. Oscar Robles for his engaging and valuable presentation, and Mr. Estrada for your moderation. We appreciate your time and your expertise. And also at this point, if you are not following us on social media, please do so. We are on Instagram, we are on Facebook, we are on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube. And in fact, today's presentation will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, I think within a week at the latest. So be sure to follow us on our social media, right? So thank you all for being part of today's CANTO conversation. We look forward to seeing you at our conference in July, CANTO 2024, and also at the next conversation. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and stay connected.